Jared, take it away. It's all yours.
Cool. Thank you. Hello, I'm Jared. I'm an engineer on the Pulp team and on the Pulp Python plugin. And today I'm going to give a little talk about all the new developments that we've done in Pulp Python land over the past year. Here are the slides if you want to go check it out after the talk. So first, the biggest change here is we got a new team member, Yitka. She joined us the Pulp team back in March and has been hard at work in developing new PulpPython features and fixing bugs. And so thank her a lot for all these contributions. We wouldn't be able to do all the stuff we've done this year in PulpPython without her help. So keep an eye out for future contributions. Little recap of what we've done so far this year. So this year we've had 9 new releases. With 3.13 back in February and 3.21 about a week ago. And we'll probably have one more release in the next week or two before the end of the year. So roughly we've been averaging a new release every month since March, which is a big turnaround from last year where we only had 2 new Y releases. So this has been a big improvement where we have a lot faster turnaround on features. Basically, the second a feature gets merged, we can do a release now, which is really great. Another big thing that's been exciting is that we've had a lot more upstream users, both contributing issues and questions in the Matrix and Discord channels. And so we love this, getting more users using the PulpPython plugin. So I'm going to go over all the new features that we've added and give some commands and examples for how to use these features and when you might want to use them. So first I want to talk about the PulpPython specific features. So these are new commands that the Python plugin can do that will help out on some workflows. So the first one is the repair metadata command /endpoint, which are added in PulpPython 3.13 and 3.15 respectively. Then next big feature is pool caching improvements. We had some new features added to this already great feature that we kind of recommend that people use at the start. And so it's way more useful. And then in the later versions, 3.19 above, added new upload features, so synchronous package upload. This is a new feature requested by services. Basically makes it so that you can upload packages without using a pulp task. And finally, there's this new scan repository version feature that will scan your repository version, all the content, and create a vulnerability report. Now we are going to have a presentation on this later this week, I think on Wednesday by Humberto. And so I'm not going to cover that feature in depth in this presentation. So you'll have to come back and check out that presentation later. So a little bit about the repair metadata command. So in PulpPython, when we go and sync or upload a package, we store all the metadata that is associated with this package on our specific Python model that we store in the database. And sometimes this metadata can be wrong, especially in the case of sync, where because of the mechanisms of how the sync works, we tend to store just the latest metadata. So the older packages might have incorrect metadata. And so we had this new command at one point that will go and fix the metadata based off what's actually stored inside the artifact. And what the great part is that it also works even if you have content only on demand. And so we're able to go and fetch the upstream metadata for the exact content. So there's two ways to use this. Either you can use the Pulp Core Manager command, which requires you to have access to the Pulp system, or you can use the new endpoint, which is put at the end of a repository. And so the difference between these two is that one, the command allows you to act on multiple repositories at one time. And so you can list of Pulp Python repository hrefs or PRNs and run this command on all your repositories, or you can do it per repository with just endpoint and a specific user's permissions to do so. So multiple options for you. Next feature I want to talk about is the new pull-through improvements. So the pull-through caching feature in Pulp is great for quickly setting up a repository to mirror an upstream without having to sync all of the content that's on that upstream. And so PyPI has like 300,000 to 400,000 packages, and it would probably take a week for you to be able to sync all of them currently in Pulp. And so instead, you can create a pull-through cache of PyPI, and then when a user goes in package, Pulp will then go and get the package on demand from the upstream and then pass it through to the result for future use. So in 3.14 and Pulp 4, we now have automatic support for adding the content that's requested to the associated repository. And so before, when you went and requested a package, it would get saved as an orphan content, and then you have to go manually add that content to the repository later. But now it's automatically added if the distribution you're using has a repository as well. And the biggest new feature is now we can filter what you're able to pull from the upstream by using the includes filters that's on the remote. And so when you go and you create a pull-through cache, you're basically attaching a remote to the distribution. And now the pull-through will respect the remote's filters on includes and excludes. And so if you only want a subset of your upstream, then you can specify these includes and excludes lists. And the great thing about these lists is that you can use the version specifier in package name. And so if like this example, on the excludes, we only want get SciPy packages that are greater than 1.12. And so you get specific versions of the packages that you're pulling from upstream. If you only want the later, you only want the oldest versions. And then finally, there's a lot of bug fixes. A lot more users using this feature. And so we've improved the performance of it, and now it's hopefully properly working. But if you find any other bugs, please do report them. We definitely want to make sure this is a priority one that is working correctly. Okay, the next big feature that we added is synchronous upload. And so, like we were talking about in the Earthbox by Pedro, when you do an upload, you create a task that will then be picked up later by a task worker to then process the upload and create the content. In 3.19, we've added a synchronous upload, which basically processes the all during the request time. And so it does not dispatch a task. It creates the content at request time and returns the response, the created content right there. Now, there are some limitations with this new upload. One, currently it only works with the file parameter. So if you were to do an upload, you can't synchronous upload, you can't use artifacts or the upload or file fields that are common on the normal upload. And then the second big limitation is because we're not using the tasking system, you can now only upload these as orphans, because we can't specify a repository because the repository requires a lock in order to upload to them. And so there's trade-offs. Obviously, you're avoiding the tasking system, so it's a very fast upload. You're going to get back the content instantly, but you'll have to do more work on your end to eventually add the content that you want to your final repository. And then the other big feature that Service contributed was you can now serve from a specific repository version. Before, we had the option to serve from either a repository or a publication. And for the repository option, it would always serve the latest repository version. And then publication is always to whatever repository version was created at publication time. But now you can just serve from a specific repository version without the need of creating publication beforehand. So more options for Pulp. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the PEP supports that we've had over the past year. And so these are specific to the actual index behavior. So on the list that's currently been merged and released is new core metadata support 2.3 and 2.4. These are available in 3.17. The next big one is JSON-based simple API. So simple API is the API by PIP and the installer tools in order to figure out what packages are available. There's been now a new JSON. Before it was all in HTML. So that's been added in 3.20. And new simple API, the versions, where new features are added and the versions get bumped. Currently, we have support up to 1.1, which is released in Python 3.21. A little bit more about the simple API. So the new JSON format makes it a lot easier to see packages that are in your repository and then parse what is available and whatever other attributes that are attached to the. Now the specific thing is that it's not a new endpoint, it's just the same endpoint, the same simple endpoint, but now you have to send a set header with this new accept content type application.py simple v1.json. And so here's an example using HTTP. You just pass in accept with a colon and give the header. And these new format applies to both the index-specific simple and the project-specific simple. And you basically just get a JSON form of the simple. The content between the HTML and the JSON are both the same, just presented differently. So yeah, this is pretty useful for writing easier code, because now you don't have to do HTML parsing to figure out what is available. And the HTML will always be there as a backup. That's just part of the PEPs standard. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the pipeline. These are PEPs that we're about to add support for. They're either merged or currently we have PRs open for them. So we're hoping to probably get them in the next release. So the big ones are annotation upload support. I'll talk a little bit right away. Next slide. Alternate locations and tracks project. So this is some new PEPs that help with the dependency confusion attack. Project status markers. So these are some new metadata that is available in simple pages to allow easy understanding of like the current project status, whether it's abandoned or currently being updated. And then some PEP specific stuff of serving the separate metadata file for wheels. These are used by PIP and Twine tools. And then the new core metadata 2.5, which was just standardized, I think. So annotation support. I'm not going to go over all of annotation support. It's just a new feature that's been recently enabled on PyPI. You can read the docs here. But the basic gist is that it's a new signature that you can upload with a Python package that can attest to basically a signature that says an identity is attesting to the contents in this package. The attestations are uploaded and then grouped together and then served back as what's called a provenance object. And so here you can see an example. You use one of their CLIs to create attestations, and then you can upload them with this flag, and then they're served under the integrity API. And it's just the name of the package, the file name / provenance. And basically, it's just JSON of the contents of the attestations, which are under the scene, just a Sigstore bundle. So they're using Sigstore in order to cryptographically sign and then store the proof of the sign on public transparency log. And so Pulp will be to store accept these new attestations, and we'll group them together into a new provenance object stored as content that is available in the repository. So this will allow us to sync these provenances that are available on upstreams and obviously allow users to upload their own. The new project metadata that I was talking about earlier is new metadata that is specific to a project per repository. And so in Pulp, each repository is like its own little unique. And so this new metadata applies to a project inside one index. And so the main three fields that have been added are these alternate locations and tracks fields, which are this new list field that basically gives you, tells the installer that, hey, this package can also be found at this other repository. And this can help mitigate dependency and confusion attacks where users go and try to register a bunch of similar named packages on publics that will conflict with known other third-party indices. And then when pip goes to install, it'll try to use the public indice over the third-party indice, and then problems. But now this new feature allows you to specify known indices that you want to prefer and hopefully avoid picking up bad packages. And then the project status metadata is basically a way to tell users, hey, this project is in this state. So you can now deprecate the projects and give it a little reason for why it's deprecated. This new content will be stored as a new content type as well. So it'll be syncable and it'll be unique per repository. And what's going to be kind of unique about it will be slightly modifiable. And what I mean by this is that we're going to add a new endpoint that's on the repository that allows you to update the project metadata. Now, what we're doing is we're not actually modifying the content. We're just creating a new content and then replacing the old one that's there. And so if you say go and sync a repository upstream and you get the project metadata, but then you want to change it on your repository, you can then just update the metadata, and then we'll create a content unit and then swap it out. That's why I put it in quotation marks as modifiable. Pulp and content and pulp is still immutable. There's no changes there. And then final major that we're going to be adding is PEPs 658, which basically serves the metadata file that's found in the wheels as a separate file that you can download separate from the main artifact. And this is a very useful feature because it drastically speeds up the pip installs. So when pip goes and tries to install a package, it goes and looks at the simple page and then goes through each one and then tries to choose the most compatible package. And then what it does is it will then download that package and then look at the dependencies to figure out what it needs to get else. And it also looks at the other metadata inside the package to see if this was a good fit. Now, for large packages, this means you're downloading a really big file, potentially that you're not going to use. If it finds that the package is downloaded, can't be used, then it's got to go to the next one on the list and download that one. And this speeds up the process by basically extracting the metadata file to be served separately. So the pip can just go and download this small metadata file, figure out if this package is a good fit, and then either go and continue downloading it or move on to the next candidate. And so this will be a big improvement for users using Pulp. I thought you'll be able to drastically speed up your pip install times, and it'll also reduce the amount of download and serving costs that the host is incurring. Now a little bit about what plans we have for 2026. So as I was saying before, we now have this new JSON for the simple index. And this unlocks a couple capabilities. One is that because this JSON format is a lot easier to parse, we could potentially use it to actually perform the syncing of the Python packages. So before, we're using actually a PI-specific index, PI-specific JSON API that is pretty much only supported by PyPI. We support it on Pulp, but it's not a requirement for to be a compatible index. And so a lot of third-party indexes don't actually implement the PyPI endpoint, which means we can't actually sync from them. And so, but they do implement this API because you need that. And so with the new JSON format, we can potentially use that as the basis for the sync and be able to sync more on third-party indices. Second major feature we're looking at is more RBAC control on Python packages. So currently, the index RBAC policy is pretty permissive, and at other times really restricted. And so for uploads, you need to have permissions on the repository itself in order to perform an upload. And then for downloads, is anybody can download it. But on the permissions is obviously a lot more granular. It's per project. And so we want to add this feature also PulpPython where for a specific repository, you can modify the permission so that the permissions are more on a package basis. And so if you say you have a repository with 5 packages and have different permissions for each one of those packages. And finally, of UV, popular Python tool, are creating their own Python registry called PyX. And this is only in a waitlist. And so we don't know much about it. Considering how popular UV is, I expect it to be a very popular alternative that's going to get a lot of adoption very quickly. And so we want to make sure that PulpPython also has support for this new format that they're creating. And that's the end. Thank you. If you have any, you can take them now. Else you can find us on Discourse and in the PulpPython Matrix channel.
Ian, go ahead.
Hey, thanks for this presentation. I had just a couple questions. So firstly, especially with the pull through caching with Python support, would you say it's even recommended at this point to synchronize all of PyPI?
Yes, I think it's been our default for a while. We need to check our docs again, but yes, we recommend that if you want to PyPI and or have a sync of all PI, I think use the pull through caching. You could do a sync of all PyPI if you specify more filters in normal sync. So this is not pulling all hundreds of thousands of packages. Then if you want all of them available, then yeah, we recommend pull through caching.
Awesome. I know it's a broad question, but is there any I don't know, basic timing data for how long it takes to sync all of PyPI?
I haven't tested it in a while, but I did an on-demand sync, and you had a pretty beefy machine that could handle it. It would probably take a day or two. The major problem is that the sync pipeline isn't great at creating lots of content units over one sync, and so it basically saves each one serially, and so there's no batching on the content itself. And so if we're creating 400,000 units all at once, then it's going to take a long time. You're basically limited by how much resources you can throw at the data.
That makes sense. Okay. Yeah, I was just curious the general size there. My last question, since you said publications aren't necessary anymore you can just directly distribute a repo version, What would be the point of using publications at that point?
Yeah, that is a very good question. And we are going to add docs explaining the difference between the two. But currently, the difference is that publications create all the metadata, all the simple files, all the PyPI files beforehand, and then just serve those files back to you. And then using a repository version means that we generate those files at request time. And so you trade off the speed. So if you have like a really large project page that had hundreds, maybe thousands of files that you notice is taking a long time, then you would create a publication to generate all that data and then just serve the file. But if you have normal size repositories, then just serving the repository version directly and letting the pulp generate the file dynamically is probably better.
Very cool. Okay, we should consider supporting that somehow in Catello. I assume other plugins perhaps have a similar support. Actually, I haven't checked.
I think the Python plugin is the only one that gives you this option.
Yes, we're kind of unique on that. And then we would like to see maybe the users pattern of other users and see. We'll probably need to do some more seeing to see how fast it is, because we're thinking that maybe we might just deprecate publications at a future date if the dynamic version is good enough for most people, but it's not something we decided on. Obviously, it's a big decision.
Certainly. Yeah, thanks for all the info. I think soon in Catello we'll be revamping our Python support a bit. So good to hear all of this.
Outstanding. Any other questions? We're just a little over time, but we have time for one more if somebody has one. All right. Jared, I'm going to stop the recording.